everybody? Ty here. Hope everyone is doing well. Feels like it's been forever since we've been able to properly do a good forecast video. We've done outlook videos, we've done tropical videos, of course, but generally, and a lot of you have found me over these regular videos, for all of you that are here, and of course, we're going to try to get one of these done today. Big holdup that I've had over the last few days has been my main source for model data the website itself just has not worked for me for whatever reason, or at least whenever I try to make videos. Any other time, oddly enough, it works, but yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there, but the performance of the website just suddenly drops off. So it looks like we're gonna have to just find another source here, because I can't figure out what's going on. It's not an issue with my computer or anything like that, but you'll see that source in just a little bit here. Right now though, let's catch up. Well, not even really catch up, because I think we did a decent job of covering things for the most part, and things haven't really changed since we last did a forecast video. But what we have here right now is the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, and the story still remains the same for the most part. Well above average here over towards the northwest. In fact, there's even chances for some 90s, maybe even a few triple digits sprinkled in over here towards this region, as well as a huge ridge is going to be developing here for this first week of September. But out towards the east, this big trough is going to be coming in and dragging in more cold air. Some areas over here towards the mid-Atlantic, the Ohio Valley, even the Great Lakes could potentially be as low as 25 degrees below average. So pretty significant stuff going on there as well. We also have to keep an eye on the monsoon region, as we're setting ourselves up for another potential event to occur here. I don't think it'll be of major significance, but considering that we're seeing more consistent rainfall here, flooding is always possible, because usually the soil does not take well with excessive groundwater towards these regions, because, well, it's not used to it. So we're going to be watching this area in particular as well. So over this next week, and really heading into the early to middle part of the month, things are kind of chaotic. This is definitely not your garden or run of the garden variety September here, or start to September. It's definitely going to feel like maybe mid to late September, even some parts of the US even starting to feel like October or even November. Another big thing, of course, to talk about is a precip. Again, here's that monsoon region we were talking about there, picking up in action over there as well. We also have the northwest here expected to be well above average in some spots in regards to its precip there. This is kind of going in line with that calling card of switching to a La Nina. We did talk about that in our outlook for the month ahead here. If you want to check that out, the tab will be in the top right hand corner. But this kind of checks out with that. It almost kind of is a verification that we are shifting into that. It is surprisingly dry over here towards the Great Lakes in the northeast a bit here. I do think in time that pattern too will change, but I think for this month we're going to see a whole lot more of this over these 1 to 2 week outlooks here. Over towards the southeast, we're kind of variable here. We're kind of like caught in the line here, so to speak, until you get over towards the Gulf Coast, where we have increased chances of above average precip here. Florida in particular really interests me during this 1 to 2 week time frame, based off of the pattern that we're about to see here, and we'll get into the further details with that. Another interesting place to make note of course, Alaska. And the thing with Alaska is a lot of what we see over towards the southern half of the state ends up pushing its way into the northwest. So this kind of further checks out what we're seeing here. So some pretty interesting notes that we're going to be making here in this video. Now, one other thing I've kind of picked up on is towards the extreme southeastern part of the state, we're slightly below average, which is interesting. It just really has a lot more to do with that storm tracker, which we will be taking a look at in time here. Another thing that we're going to be looking at is the prospect of maybe some severe weather returning. Like I said, I'm not expecting anything of major significance towards these areas right now, but an isolated damaging wind gust or maybe some small hail would be possible. Tornado threat's going to remain pretty low, so not going to be going into great detail with that, but we will be keeping an eye on these upcoming days here for maybe an isolated severe storm or two, Nothing that I would be panicking about though, or anything like that. Alright, so without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at Weather Nerds. This is what we're going to be using now. Weather Nerds is a free to use website, has a pretty good model overlays here as well. It doesn't look too different. I always worried about the presentation. I want you guys to be able to enjoy yourselves. And of course, if you look over to the bottom left corner, I'm actually going to shift this up towards the right since we'll be able to get a better view of it here. This, of course, is the euro. So business as usual on this end. We'll throw both of these into a loop and we'll keep rolling from that point. So the main thing that I'm picking up on, of course, is the fact that we have a pretty big trough coming up on both of these models here. And this is where that cold air really comes into play. Now, as we go into that next week and beyond here, that's when things really kind of start to level out. We start to see some ridging beginning to return over towards the eastern half of the U.S. A little bit more in the way of troughing beginning to return. And that's when I really think that prospect of severe weather really returns. The GFS picks up on it pretty well. The euro is a little bit more uncertain, but its range is slightly more limited. If we were to go ahead and look over to that top right-hand corner here, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about there. But yeah, here's that trough again. This is this first week. After we get past the first week, here's the ridge building up, makes its way out to the east, and then here's that trough. Now, how this progresses is really going to be a determining factor here as well. I think this also helps enhance that monsoon activity over here towards the southwest as well. And both models did do a pretty good job of picking up on that. So plenty to watch here in the long run. Now, one other thing that we're going to talk about as we switch this over to the 700 millibar map here is we're going to be putting increased interest in Florida as well, because I'm expecting increased shower and storm activity over these next few days, especially as that first trough really comes in. You can see the contour lines here. It's not quite as pronounced as the last website we were using, but you can see that there's plenty of activity possible in onshore flow to go with that. So I do think that'll help increase in shower and thunderstorm chances over towards the Florida Peninsula here. Towards the panhandle, it might be a little bit drier, but I still think storm chances are going to be elevated there as well. You can kind of see a relatively similar look on the euro here. The GFS and the euro are in pretty good agreement this time, which makes life a little bit easier in the long run when it regards to forecasting. And then if you look out here, while this is of course an operational run and I don't like to read into those too much, there is a chance that that could be potentially Tropical Storm Gabrielle if it develops out in the Atlantic. We dropped a short on that this morning or this afternoon, going over the details with that. So we'll have to watch that and see what happens next. We are going to enter another period where the tropics could get pretty active, and really the storm track is going to be the determining factor as to whether or not we see any impacts. At the most right now, if that scenario were to come into play, the most we would see is waves, because as you can see, this bends out to sea well in advance here. Looks like it may even miss Bermuda at this point, so no direct impacts to land, but rip currents and waves will probably be the talking point with that, if anything at all. So let's go ahead, take the euro off of here, because there are some overlays that are a little bit more on the limited side here that we can't get good usage of out of Weather Nerds. I mean, it's free to use. We paid on the last website that we were using before, so at the end of the day we can't complain. But looking at the temperature map, it's not too dissimilar from what we've been seeing. You can see the overlay right here, and you can see where we have the warmest temperatures still, where we have those 90 plus degrees temperatures in Texas. As we get towards the back half of the pattern, you can see that kind of sneaking back up into the deep south over here. So at some point this is unfortunately going to end, and don't get me wrong, I've been enjoying the cooler temperatures, and I'm sure a lot of you have as well. If you look out towards the west, we still have those above average temperatures, and if I were to freeze this frame really quickly here and go back just a little bit, you're seeing that right. We're starting to push maybe even 100-degree temps over here towards maybe even Washington at this point, which is pretty impressive. Also, that kind of sucks for you guys, because you guys aren't used to seeing that too often. So make sure you have the AC with lined with plenty of freon. Make sure that you're good there. Make sure that you try to practice your proper heat safety precautions. Try to avoid being outside for extensive periods of time, etc. But either way here, it looks like we have a pretty notable, dare I say, heat wave that pops up here. And again, as we mentioned before, it doesn't take too much longer after that first week to start to see that heat beginning to build back up towards the deep south, and then we start to see the northwest begin to cool down, where we start to see those mornings with the 30 to maybe even 40-degree temperatures there. And then before we know it, we're kind of back to business as usual by the time we get towards the middle part of the month again. Okay, so with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at our thunderstorm potential. Mainly going to be looking at Cape here. Like I said, there's some parameters that I'm not going to really have access to with this version, but it is what it is. I kind of like the layout of this more, honestly. But either way, as far as thunderstorm energy is concerned, not a whole lot to work with in the short range. It's really towards the long range, I would say towards the end of this model run, where things kind of interest me here. If we were to go back a few frames, look at that, where we start to get into the 3,000 plus joules per kilogram Cape. This is toward the 11th and the 10th, where we're going to be watching for maybe a little bit of severe weather potential. Now, I don't know if I'm able to access QTs on here, but I will be at least starting to look into that more. I'm still kind of new to this. I think this might be it, but we'll experiment with that later. We keep things rolling here. You can see some return of Cape here as well over towards the Midwest to go forward as we get into the latter half, or the middle part of the month, I would say, here at this point. So a lot that we're going to be keeping track of on this end as we continue to go forward here. So last but not least, let's go ahead and take a look at what the simulated reflectivity could be like. Like I said, I'm still kind of new to the website, so I'm adjusting to it. Not doing too bad with it, but we're still working on some things here. And then, see, this is what I was kind of talking about in previous videos as well. The cold air is so rich at this point where we see potential for some snow maybe north of the border. Now, I'm not quite as familiar with the topography in Canada, but I'm sure there's some maybe some mountains over here as well. But the fact that we're seeing that in early September is really something, to say the least. It would not surprise me that if this pattern were to persist and come back towards the latter half of the month here, we could even see potential for some snow, maybe just barely dipping past the border here and making it into some of these northwestern states particularly. But of course, there are a lot of variables that come into play at this point. You do see some winter precip even popping up here. Otherwise, outside of that, I haven't seen anything that stands out to me as far as a severe weather setup just yet. At least not in the short range. The main thing that I've been really talking about in regards to precipitation is, of course, over towards the monsoon region, where it's pretty active in the short to medium range especially, and then in the long, and then also over towards the Florida Peninsula as well. It just seems like we're going to have a persistent stream of moisture as we go throughout the month here. As we go further along, we know that things are prone to change here. But that pretty much is it for this one. I appreciate you all being here and sticking it out with me as I try to figure out why the heck I couldn't do forecast videos. But we're back now, and we'll be back in rhythm really soon. But that being said, again, appreciate you all being here. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Definitely let me know your thoughts. And I will see you in the next video. Take care and have a wonderful rest of your Labor Day.